Marcus Reynolds stands in the airport terminal, his finger hovering over the execute button on his tablet. Security guards approach rapidly. His mind flashes back to the flight attendant's smirk. First class isn't for everyone. He presses the button. Airline screens go black. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to stay updated with more amazing true stories of justice served. Now let's rewind to understand how this brilliant tech CEO reached his breaking point. Marcus Reynolds wasn't born into privilege or wealth. His story began in the rough neighborhoods of South Chicago, where survival often took precedence over dreams. At just 11 years old, tragedy struck when both his parents died in a car accident, leaving him to be raised by his grandmother who worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. Despite these challenges, Marcus showed extraordinary intelligence from an early age. While other kids played basketball after school, Marcus spent hours at the community center, teaching himself to code on donated computers. The center became his sanctuary, a place where his mind could escape the harsh realities of his environment. By 14, he was already fixing computers for neighbors, earning enough to help his grandmother with bills. "Computers make sense," he once told his high school counselor. "They don't care what you look like or where you come from. They only respond to what you know." This philosophy carried Marcus through high school and earned him a partial scholarship to Illinois Tech. Even with the scholarship, Marcus worked 2 jobs to afford tuition. During the day, he attended classes, and at night, he worked as a security guard and weekend tech support specialist. Sleep became a luxury he couldn't afford, but his passion for technology kept him going. In his junior year, Marcus developed a revolutionary approach to cybersecurity that caught the attention of several tech companies. His algorithm could detect intrusion patterns before they became threats, a breakthrough that earned him job offers before graduation. But Marcus had bigger plans. Instead of accepting corporate positions, Marcus took a risk and founded Reynolds Technologies from his grandmother's basement. The early days were difficult. Potential clients often dismissed him, assuming a young black man couldn't possibly understand enterprise-level security. In pitch meetings, investors would direct questions to his white assistants, assuming Marcus was just a token diversity hire rather than the founder. "I learned to let my work speak for itself," Marcus later shared in a rare interview. "When people underestimated me, it just gave me more time to outwork them." His persistence paid off when a major bank experienced a devastating hack that cost them millions. Their established security vendors failed to provide solutions, so they reluctantly gave Reynolds Technologies a chance. Within 48 hours, Marcus identified the vulnerability, patched the system, and recovered 70% of the stolen data. This success became the turning point for his company. Over the next decade, Reynolds Technologies grew from a one-man operation to a global cybersecurity leader employing over 5,000 people. The company's security protocols protected everything from banking systems to healthcare networks, with annual revenues exceeding $3 billion. Despite this success, Marcus remained grounded. He continued coding alongside his teams and mentored young technologists from disadvantaged backgrounds. Unlike many tech executives who flaunted their wealth, Marcus preferred understated comfort. His wardrobe consisted mainly of quality basics: dark jeans, plain button-downs, and minimalist sneakers. He drove a modest electric car and lived in a comfortable but not ostentatious home. His few indulgences included funding technology programs in underserved schools and an occasional first-class flight when business demanded it. And business was definitely demanding it today. After working 72 hours straight on a critical security update, Marcus was exhausted but satisfied. His team had closed a vulnerability that could have affected millions of users worldwide. Now, he needed to fly to San Francisco for a meeting with international clients that could expand Reynolds Technologies into Asian markets. Normally, Marcus would take his company's private jet for such important meetings, but a mechanical issue grounded the aircraft. With no time to waste, his assistant booked him a first-class ticket on Atlantic Airways' next flight to San Francisco. The meeting was too important to miss, representing a potential $400 million contract that would create hundreds of new jobs. As Marcus packed his tablet with the presentation materials, he had no idea that his routine business trip would soon become a turning point not just for him personally, but for an entire industry. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind. Sometimes, baby, the world won't give you what you've earned, but never let that stop you from being excellent. Excellence had always been Marcus's response to adversity, but some adversities test even the most resilient spirits, as he was about to discover. The Atlantic Airways terminal bustled with early morning travelers. Marcus Reynolds arrived with his small carry-on suitcase, dressed in comfortable jeans and a simple black polo for the 6-hour flight. His plan was to change into his business suit just before landing. Dark circles under his eyes testified to his recent 72-hour coding marathon, but the excitement of the pending international deal kept him alert. Marcus approached the first-class priority check-in counter and presented his identification and ticket confirmation. The attendant processed his boarding pass efficiently and directed him toward the security checkpoint. So far, everything proceeded normally. After clearing security, Marcus headed to the first-class lounge to catch up on emails before boarding. The lounge attendant scanned his boarding pass and welcomed him with a professional smile. Marcus found a quiet corner, ordered a black coffee, and immersed himself in work. 40 minutes later, the boarding announcement for his flight to San Francisco echoed through the lounge. Marcus gathered his belongings and headed to gate B-17. He joined the priority boarding line, observing other first-class passengers, primarily white men in business attire, a few white women in designer clothing, and an elderly Asian couple. When Marcus reached the front of the line, flight attendant Veronica Patterson scanned his boarding pass. Her polite smile immediately transformed into a frown. "I think there's been a mistake," she said, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "This is the first-class boarding line." Marcus showed her his boarding pass again. "Yes, I'm aware. I have a first-class ticket." Veronica's eyes narrowed as she scrutinized his casual attire and carry-on bag. "May I see your ID again? We need to verify some information." Marcus provided his driver's license, maintaining his composure despite the obvious skepticism in her tone. "Reynolds. Marcus Reynolds," she read slowly, glancing between the ID and Marcus's face multiple times. "And what do you do, Mr. Reynolds?" No other passenger had been asked this question. Marcus took a deep breath. "I'm the CEO of Reynolds Technologies." A smirk flickered across Veronica's face. "Of course you are. And I need to verify that this first-class ticket was properly purchased. One moment while I get my supervisor." As they waited, other passengers stared. Some looked uncomfortable at the obvious discrimination unfolding before them. Others seemed smugly amused, as if witnessing confirmation of their own biases. Supervisor Gerald Hammond arrived shortly, a tall man with a permanent scowl. Veronica whispered something in his ear, occasionally glancing at Marcus. "Sir," Hammond addressed Marcus condescendingly, "there seems to be an issue with your ticket. First-class seats are quite expensive. Are you certain you're at the correct gate?" Marcus maintained his professional demeanor despite the growing tension. "Yes, I'm certain. My assistant booked this ticket yesterday. It's fully paid for, as your system clearly shows." "Well, sometimes our system makes errors," Hammond replied dismissively. "I'll need to see additional identification and proof of purchase." Again, no other passengers had been subjected to such scrutiny. The line behind Marcus grew, with impatient travelers witnessing his humiliation. Marcus produced his corporate, credit card and company ID. "I've provided multiple forms of identification now. My ticket is valid, as your system confirms. I'd like to board the plane." Hammond examined the new documents with exaggerated care. "Sir, your attitude is becoming problematic. If you can't cooperate calmly, we'll need to have security escort you." "I am calm," Marcus responded, his voice steady despite the rising frustration. "I've cooperated with every request. I simply want to board with the first-class ticket I purchased." A white businessman behind Marcus interjected, "Come on, just let him through or move him aside. We'll miss our departure time." Rather than addressing the actual issue, Hammond seized this opportunity. "Sir, you're holding up other passengers. I'm going to have to ask you to step aside while we resolve this." When Marcus stood his ground, Hammond signaled to nearby security officers. 2 uniformed guards approached immediately. "Is there a problem here?" one guard asked, hand resting on his taser. "This gentleman is causing a disturbance and refusing to comply with boarding procedures," Hammond stated falsely. "That's not true," Marcus objected. "I've complied with every request. They're refusing to honor my valid first-class ticket without justification." The security guards exchanged glances. "Sir, please step aside or we'll have to remove you from the terminal." Aware of how quickly situations like this could escalate for black men, Marcus made a calculation. The San Francisco meeting was too important to miss. Creating a scene would only result in him being detained, possibly injured, and certainly missing his flight. "Fine," Marcus conceded. "What are my options to get to San Francisco today?" Hammond's face showed momentary surprise at Marcus's compliance, quickly masked with authoritative satisfaction. "We can accommodate you in economy class if there's space available." "Economy?" Marcus questioned. "When I paid for first class?" "It's either that or the next flight, which departs in 6 hours, Hammond stated with finality. "Your choice." With the international clients expecting him in San Francisco, Marcus had no real choice at all. "Economy, then." As security escorted him to the customer service desk for rebooking, one officer gripped Marcus's arm unnecessarily tight, causing him to stumble. In the process, his suit bag caught on a barrier pole, tearing a visible hole in his carefully pressed jacket. "Careful with the merchandise," the second officer joked, drawing laughter from several onlookers. Customer service issued Marcus a new boarding pass for an economy middle seat in the back of the plane. As he finally boarded, he had to walk through the first-class cabin where several seats remained empty, including one that now accommodated a late-arriving white passenger who had just been upgraded due to his frequent flyer status. As Marcus continued toward the economy section, he heard Veronica's voice behind him. "First class isn't for everyone." For 6 uncomfortable hours, Marcus sat wedged between 2 large passengers, unable to work, his torn suit jacket a constant reminder of the morning's humiliation. The economy cabin was full, stuffy, and offered minimal service. When he requested water, the flight attendant forgot to bring it until his third reminder. As the plane began its descent into San Francisco, Marcus looked out the small window and made a silent promise to himself. This wouldn't be the end of the story. The taxi dropped Marcus off at the Ritz-Carlton San Francisco, with barely an hour before his crucial meeting. Inside his hotel room, he surveyed the damage, wrinkled clothes from the cramped economy seat, the visible tear in his only suit jacket, and eyes reddened from exhaustion and suppressed anger. The mirror reflected back a man whose dignified appearance had been deliberately dismantled. 20 minutes later, Marcus had done his best with the situation. He'd steamed his shirt in the bathroom, used the hotel sewing kit to make an emergency repair to his jacket, and splashed cold water on his face repeatedly. It wasn't perfect, but it would have to do. The meeting took place in a private conference room at the hotel. As Marcus walked in, he noted the subtle shifts in expression from the potential clients, representatives from 3 major Asian technology corporations. Their initial looks of assessment turned to barely concealed surprise as they noticed his disheveled appearance. "Forgive my appearance," Marcus addressed the elephant in the room directly. "Air travel difficulties, but I assure you, our security solutions are far more reliable than American Airlines." The unexpected humor broke the tension. Over the next 2 hours, Marcus delivered his presentation with the precision and expertise that had built Reynolds Technologies into an industry leader. He answered technical questions with depth and clarity, demonstrating both the power of his security framework and his personal mastery of the technology. By the end of the meeting, his appearance had become irrelevant. The clients were impressed by the substance of his work, and preliminary contracts were signed. The deal was worth $420 million over 5 years, the largest international expansion in his company's history. As the executives shook hands and departed, the lead investor from Singapore paused. "Mr. Reynolds, my father always said you can judge a person by how they perform under pressure. Today, you've shown exceptional character." When the door closed behind them, Marcus finally allowed himself to exhale. The professional mask he'd maintained throughout the meeting crumbled as he sank into a chair. the morning's humiliation flooding back now that the adrenaline of the presentation had subsided. What's your reaction to how Marcus was treated? Comment. Number 1, if you believe he should file a formal complaint with the airline, or number 2, if you think he should let it go and focus on his success. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see how this story unfolds. How would you have handled this situation if you were in Marcus's shoes? Let's continue to see what Marcus decided to do. Back in his hotel room that evening, Marcus ordered room service and opened his laptop. The initial satisfaction of securing the massive contract was now overshadowed by a deeper, festering wound. The incident at the airport had triggered something primal. A lifetime of similar experiences compressed into those few terrible minutes. As he picked at his dinner, memories surfaced unbidden. The third-grade teacher who accused him of cheating, because no one from this neighborhood could score perfect math tests consistently. The college administrator who suggested he might be more comfortable at a community college, despite his stellar grades. The venture capitalist who asked if he was the help when he arrived to pitch his startup. The countless times he'd been followed in high-end stores, stopped by police while driving his own car, or mistaken for staff at industry events. Each incident on its own could be dismissed, rationalized, or endured. But collectively, they formed a relentless current eroding his spirit over decades. Today's humiliation was merely the most recent wave in that unending tide. Enough, Marcus whispered to the empty room. He opened a new browser window and began researching Atlantic Airways. The airline had faced several discrimination lawsuits over the years, but most were settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements. Their customer service ratings showed a significant disparity in satisfaction between white passengers and passengers of color. Review sites contained numerous accounts of random additional screening that seemed anything but random. As the night deepened, Marcus's research expanded. He discovered that Atlantic Airways used a vulnerable database system, one his own company had warned about in security briefings. Their passenger management software operated on outdated protocols with minimal encryption. Their entire booking system ran through central servers with predictable security patterns. For someone of Marcus's expertise, their digital infrastructure might as well have been secured with a paper lock. He could penetrate their systems within hours, perhaps minutes. The ethical programmer in him recoiled at the thought. Throughout his career, Marcus had used his skills to protect systems, not exploit them. He'd built his reputation on integrity. But another voice spoke from a deeper place, the voice of the boy from South Chicago, who learned that sometimes conventional channels of justice weren't designed for people like him. The voice of the entrepreneur who knew that powerful corporations rarely faced consequences for how they treated people without power. The voice of the black man who had swallowed his dignity too many times in the name of professionalism. Marcus opened his coding environment and began writing exploratory scripts, not to damage, just to understand the potential. As the code flowed from his fingers, he rationalized. He wouldn't destroy anything. He would merely expose the truth, show the patterns that individual incidents concealed, make visible what was deliberately kept invisible. By 3 a.m, Marcus had created an elegant backdoor into Atlantic Airways' system. He hadn't activated it yet, merely confirmed it would work. The program would collect data on passenger treatment, fare discrepancies, and staff behavior patterns. It would compile evidence rather than wreak havoc. Still, as dawn approached, Marcus wrestled with his conscience. Was he becoming what he had fought against? Was he crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed? He closed his laptop without deploying the code and finally fell into a troubled sleep. Dreams filled with airport terminals where all the doors led back to where he started. The morning after the meeting, Marcus woke to sunlight streaming through hotel curtains he'd forgotten to close. For a blissful moment, he remembered only the successful contract signing. Then the memory of the airport incident crashed back, along with the knowledge of what he'd nearly done last night. Over breakfast, Marcus made a decision. If he was going to proceed, and he hadn't fully committed yet, he would do so methodically, ethically, and with purpose. Not as an act of revenge, but as a pursuit of justice, not just for himself, but for everyone who had faced similar treatment without his resources or platform. Marcus extended his stay in San Francisco by 3 days, claiming he needed to finalize details of the international agreement. In reality, he needed time away from his regular responsibilities to conduct proper research. His first target was Atlantic Airways corporate leadership. William Caldwell had served as CEO for 8 years, taking over when the airline was struggling financially. Under his leadership, the company had cut costs aggressively while expanding routes. Profits had increased, but employee satisfaction had plummeted. Most concerning were Caldwell's comments at industry events, where he had referred to diversity initiatives as necessary public relations exercises and complained about sensitivity cutting into efficiency. Marcus dug deeper into the executive team, finding troubling patterns. Diversity decreased at each level of leadership, with the board remaining predominantly white and male, despite the company's public commitments to inclusion. The few leaders of color had limited decision-making authority and frequently departed after short tenures. Next, Marcus researched the specific employees involved in his incident. Flight attendant Veronica Patterson had worked for Atlantic for 11 years and had received 4 promotions despite multiple passenger complaints. Supervisor Gerald Hammond had a similar pattern: advancement despite documented issues in customer interactions, particularly with minority passengers. Most disturbing was what Marcus found in passenger complaint data. Using public records requests and aviation consumer protection filings, he uncovered a statistical pattern. Passengers with traditionally African American or Hispanic names were 3 times more likely to be downgraded, questioned about their tickets, or subjected to additional screening. These incidents were clustered around specific employees and routes, but had never triggered systemic investigation. By the second day, Marcus had compiled enough public information to justify concern. Now he faced the ethical crossroads again. Would he activate the code he'd written to gather evidence from inside their systems? After hours of consideration, Marcus made his decision. That evening, he uploaded his program through a series of anonymizing servers. The code was designed to be minimally invasive. It would gather data without disrupting operations, leaving a virtually undetectable footprint. It would only collect information relevant to potential discrimination, not personal passenger details. Within hours, the program began feeding information to a secure server. The patterns from public data were confirmed and amplified by internal communications. Emails between staff members contained coded language about passenger fit for premium services. There were unofficial watch lists of names that should receive additional scrutiny. Training materials covered passenger profiling under the guise of security. Most damning was the discovery that Marcus's own incident had been recorded on security cameras, with the footage subsequently marked for deletion as routine maintenance, a clear violation of retention policies for disputed passenger interactions. As data accumulated, Marcus realized he needed legal expertise. He contacted Zoe Chen, a brilliant attorney specializing in civil rights cases whom he'd met at a technology conference. Without revealing his data collection methods, Marcus shared the public information he'd gathered and asked for her assessment. Over lunch at a discreet San Francisco restaurant, Zoe reviewed the materials. "There's enough here to raise serious concerns," she acknowledged. "But corporate discrimination cases are notoriously difficult to prove. Companies like Atlantic have teams of lawyers who excel at attributing incidents to individual employee actions rather than systemic problems." "What if I had more definitive evidence?" Marcus asked cautiously. Zoe studied his face. "As your potential attorney, I have to advise caution about how such evidence is obtained. Some methods could undermine an otherwise strong case." "Hypothetically speaking," Marcus pressed, "if internal communications confirm discriminatory patterns, that would significantly strengthen a case," Zoe admitted. "But I'd need to know exactly how such information was acquired before using it." Their conversation continued in carefully measured terms, with Zoe outlining what would constitute legally admissible evidence versus what might create liability. By the end of lunch, Marcus had a clearer understanding of the boundaries. Back in his hotel room, Marcus received an unexpected alert from his program. It had identified other passengers who had experienced similar treatment to his, not just statistical patterns but specific individuals. One name caught his attention: Dr. Eliza Washington, a respected cardiologist who had filed a detailed complaint after being removed from a first-class seat 3 months ago. Marcus reached out to Dr. Washington through professional channels, expressing interest in her experience without revealing his own investigation. She agreed to a phone call that evening. "I rarely discuss this publicly," Dr. Washington told him after he explained his interest. "As a black woman in medicine, I've learned to pick my battles carefully. But what happened on that flight wasn't just inconvenient, it was dehumanizing." Her story echoed Marcus's experience with disturbing similarity, down to the same flight, attendant and supervisor. As they talked, Marcus connected with several other passengers who had filed complaints against Atlantic, forming an informal alliance of affected individuals. Each conversation strengthened his resolve. On the third day, Marcus's program delivered its most valuable finding yet. The airline maintained a secret passenger profile system that assigned risk and value scores based partly on demographic factors including race, despite public denials of such practices. The system influenced everything from security screening, intensity to upgrade eligibility. This discovery removed Marcus's last hesitations. With clear evidence of systemic discrimination, he began formulating a more active intervention. Justice would require more than passive data collection. As his flight back home approached, Marcus finalized his strategy. This wouldn't be a simple hack or a conventional lawsuit. It would be a carefully orchestrated campaign to force accountability where traditional methods had failed. The code he had written would be his instrument, but the composition would be entirely of his own design. The problem with discrimination, Marcus reflected as he packed his bag, is that it thrives in darkness. Time to bring Atlantic Airways into the light. 2 weeks after returning from San Francisco, Marcus implemented the first phase of his plan. The modifications to his original code were subtle but significant. Rather than merely collecting data, the program would now introduce minor glitches into Atlantic Airways' internal systems. Nothing that would affect flight safety or strand passengers, but enough to create discomfort for those who had participated in discriminatory practices. The company's staff scheduling software suddenly developed peculiar patterns. Veronica Patterson found herself consistently assigned to the least desirable routes, overnight flights to remote destinations with difficult passengers and minimal layover time. Gerald Hammond's supervisory shifts mysteriously aligned with holiday weekends and major sporting events he was known to follow passionately. Their complaints to technical support vanished into digital black holes. Each time they reported issues, the system created tickets that were automatically closed as resolved without action. Meanwhile, other staff members experienced no such difficulties. In the executive suite, CEO William Caldwell arrived one morning to find a detailed report in his email. The sender was listed as System Analytics, an official-looking internal address. The report contained comprehensive statistics showing racial disparities in passenger treatment across the airline's operations, information that had been gathered but never previously compiled into a single document. The report concluded with a sobering assessment. Based on current patterns, Atlantic Airways faces a projected 32% likelihood of class action litigation within the next 18 months, with estimated settlement costs exceeding $70 million. Caldwell's immediate reaction was to summon his legal and communications teams. "Find out who sent this and shut it down," he demanded. "This kind of internal witch hunt undermines our culture." But no sender could be identified. The email appeared to have originated from within the company's own servers, triggered by an automated process no one had authorized. While Caldwell was dealing with this unwelcome analysis, board member Dr. Eliza Washington, the same cardiologist who had shared her discriminatory experience with Marcus, received a different communication. Her email contained flight incident, reports specifically involving passengers of color, extracted from the company's customer service database. Unlike Caldwell, Dr. Washington recognized the significance of the information and began her own quiet investigation. Marcus monitored these developments through his program, which now functioned as both intelligence gatherer and strategic implementer. He took satisfaction in the knowledge that his code was performing exactly as designed, creating pressure where it was most needed while empowering potential allies within the system. Phase 2 began 3 days later. when Marcus deployed an algorithm that highlighted price discrepancies in the airline's booking system. When users with traditionally African American names searched for flights, the system briefly displayed the higher prices they were being charged compared to other demographic groups before settling on the standard rate. This fleeting transparency wasn't enough to disrupt bookings, but sufficient to be noticed and discussed on social media. Did anyone else see Atlantic Airways showing different prices for the same flight? Became a trending topic on multiple platforms. Technology journalists began investigating, publishing articles questioning whether the airline's algorithms contained hidden biases. The company's public relations team scrambled to deny any intentional discrimination, attributing the displayed price differences to A/B testing of user interfaces and dynamic pricing based on browsing history. Few were convinced by these explanations. As public scrutiny intensified, Atlantic Airways' stock price dipped by 2%, a modest decline, but enough to capture the attention of financial analysts who began asking uncomfortable questions about the company's risk management practices. Inside the company, IT teams worked frantically to identify the source of these technical anomalies. Their investigations were hampered by Marcus's careful coding, which disguised each intervention as plausible system behavior. The few suspicious patterns they identified were obscured by false trails suggesting internal negligence rather than external manipulation. Meanwhile, Marcus anonymously fed additional information to Dr. Washington, who had emerged as a vocal advocate for accountability within the board. The evidence he provided strengthened her position in increasingly contentious board meetings where Caldwell attempted to dismiss discrimination concerns as isolated incidents. "The data suggests otherwise," Dr. Washington would counter, producing statistical analyses that Caldwell couldn't easily refute. Her background in medical research made her particularly effective at identifying patterns that others might miss or dismiss. By the fourth week of Marcus's campaign, Atlantic Airways faced a perfect storm of challenges. Consumer trust was eroding, employee morale was suffering, media scrutiny was intensifying, and internal conflicts were consuming leadership bandwidth. Throughout this period, Marcus maintained his normal professional routine. He oversaw Reynolds Technologies operations, participated in industry events, and even appeared on a technology podcast discussing cybersecurity best practices, all while remotely monitoring his program's effects on Atlantic Airways. The ethical weight of his actions wasn't lost on him. Late one night, after reviewing the latest data from his program, Marcus called his longtime mentor, Dr. James Wilson, a former ethics professor who had guided him since college. "I need perspective on a hypothetical situation," Marcus began, carefully. "Those are rarely truly hypothetical," Dr. Wilson replied with characteristic insight. "But continue." Marcus outlined a scenario that paralleled his actions without directly implicating himself. If traditional systems of accountability fail consistently for certain groups of people, does that justify creating alternative mechanisms of accountability? Dr. Wilson considered the question thoughtfully. "Justice systems that consistently fail specific populations eventually lose legitimacy," he observed. "But vigilantism carries its own ethical hazards. The question becomes, are you creating accountability or merely substituting one form of power for another?" This question haunted Marcus as his program continued its work. Was he simply replacing corporate power with technological power? Was his pursuit of justice becoming distorted by personal grievance? These doubts intensified when Atlantic Airways announced cost-cutting measures in response to their technical difficulties, including potential furloughs for frontline staff, many of whom were themselves people of color working entry-level positions. Marcus hadn't anticipated this outcome. His target was systemic discrimination and the leadership that enabled it, not vulnerable employees caught in the middle. That night, he modified his code to ensure that scheduling glitches would not affect employees below certain salary thresholds, protecting the most economically vulnerable staff. As the sixth week of his campaign began, Marcus's program detected a significant development. Atlantic Airways had hired elite cybersecurity solutions, a renowned firm specializing in identifying and neutralizing digital threats. Their team of experts would undoubtedly bring more sophisticated methods to the investigation, than the airline's internal IT staff. Marcus recognized it was time to accelerate his timeline. The next phase would need to create enough public pressure to force structural change before his program was discovered. With careful precision, he modified his code one more time, preparing for a more visible intervention that would bring the airline's discriminatory practices into undeniable public view. What he didn't realize was that his own digital fingerprints, imperceptible to most observers, had already caught the attention of someone who knew his work intimately well. As Marcus's interventions intensified, panic spread through Atlantic Airways' executive offices. CEO William Caldwell called an emergency leadership meeting on a Sunday morning, assembling his top team in the company's glass-walled conference room. "This is no longer about technical glitches," Caldwell declared, pacing at the head of the table. "We're under attack. Our booking systems show price discrepancies we can't explain. Our scheduling software is creating staffing nightmares. And somehow, internal reports about passenger demographics are appearing out of nowhere." The chief information officer, a nervous man with thinning hair, nodded vigorously. "We've scanned our systems repeatedly. Whatever's happening is sophisticated, possibly state-sponsored industrial sabotage." "I don't care if it's sponsored by Mars," Caldwell snapped. "Fix it." "We've engaged elite cybersecurity solutions," the CIO replied defensively. "Their team arrives tomorrow." At the far end of the table, Dr. Eliza Washington listened silently. As the only black executive in the room, she had spent years carefully navigating corporate politics to maintain her influence. Today, she decided, that caution would end. "Has anyone considered," she interjected calmly, "that these attacks seem focused specifically on areas where our company has failed to address discrimination concerns?" The room fell silent. Caldwell's face reddened. "That's preposterous. These are technical issues, not social justice matters." "Are they?" Dr. Washington opened a folder containing the anonymous data she'd received. "The pattern is clear. The affected systems all touch on areas where we've received discrimination complaints. The scheduling disruptions only impact staff with documented bias incidents. The pricing transparency only reveals disparities we've denied exist. Correlation isn't causation," the legal director interjected smoothly. "And frankly, this discussion distracts from the real issue of security." "Does it?" Dr. Washington challenged. "Because addressing the underlying discrimination problems might solve our security issues more effectively than another technical patch." Caldwell ended the discussion by redirecting focus to immediate technical solutions, but Dr. Washington's words lingered uncomfortably in the room. As the meeting concluded, she noticed several colleagues giving her thoughtful glances. Meanwhile, Marcus's program continued its work. That evening, passengers using Atlantic Airways' booking system began receiving unusual notifications. "Based on your profile, your fare has been adjusted by 12%. White customers saw no such messages, but passengers of color consistently received them, along with higher prices. Would you have supported Marcus's technological approach to fighting discrimination, or would you have advised a different strategy? Comment number 1 if you think his methods were justified given the circumstances, or number 2, if you believe traditional legal channels would have been more appropriate. Like this video if you're enjoying this story of tech justice, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories. Now, how do you think Atlantic Airways will respond to this increasing pressure? By morning, social media erupted. Thousands of customers shared screenshots comparing prices. News organizations picked up the story, running headlines questioning Atlantic Airways pricing algorithms. The hashtag #DodgerFlyingWhileBlack began trending nationally as people shared their own experiences of discrimination in air travel. Caldwell appeared on a financial news network, attempting damage control. "These pricing discrepancies are the result of criminal hacking, not company policy," he insisted. "Atlantic Airways values all our customers equally." His words rang hollow as more evidence emerged. Former employees began speaking out about internal practices they'd witnessed. Travel bloggers conducted live experiments showing consistent price differences based on perceived ethnicity. Class action law firms began soliciting affected customers for potential litigation. Inside the company, The pressure intensified. The stock price dropped 15% in a single trading session. Board members received concerned calls from major investors. Dr. Washington's position strengthened as her earlier warnings now seemed prescient. Marcus monitored these developments from his office, maintaining his normal routine while his program continued its work autonomously. The campaign was exceeding his expectations, creating the public awareness he had hoped for without revealing his involvement. Then came the unexpected escalation. Marcus's program detected unusual activity within Atlantic Airways systems, evidence that someone was tracing his code's pathways with remarkable precision. The cybersecurity team wasn't just searching blindly anymore. They were following a specific trail that only someone intimately familiar with his programming style would recognize. Digging deeper, Marcus discovered that Elite Cybersecurity Solutions had assigned their top specialist to the case, Alexandra Rivera, a brilliant programmer who had once interned at Reynolds Technologies. Alexandra had studied Marcus's coding approaches for months and had even collaborated with him on several projects before pursuing her own career path. If anyone could identify his digital signature, it would be Alexandra. Marcus faced a critical decision: abandon the campaign before being discovered, or accelerate toward his endgame. After careful consideration, he chose the latter. His program released its most damaging evidence yet: recordings of internal communications showing deliberate discriminatory practices, including discussions of Caldwell explicitly directing staff to make certain passengers feel less welcome in premium cabins. These revelations created a corporate crisis. Atlantic Airways' public relations team stopped responding to media inquiries. Advertising campaigns were suspended. Partners and affiliates began distancing themselves from the airline. By week's end, Dr. Washington called for an emergency board meeting. With investor pressure mounting, she proposed a comprehensive overhaul of company leadership and policies, starting with Caldwell's removal. The board meeting was contentious. Caldwell fought back, accusing Washington of orchestrating the attacks to advance her own career. But as more evidence emerged and stock prices continued falling, even his strongest allies wavered. "We have a fiduciary responsibility," one longtime Caldwell supporter finally admitted. "This situation threatens the company's very existence." While this boardroom drama unfolded, Marcus received an encrypted message from Alexandra Rivera. "I know it's you. We need to talk." Alexandra Rivera sat alone in her temporary office at Atlantic Airways headquarters, surrounded by digital forensic tools and multiple monitors displaying code fragments. For 2 weeks, she had immersed herself in the airline's compromised systems. Following digital breadcrumbs, most investigators would never notice. Unlike the company's internal IT team, Alexandra wasn't misled by false trails or decoy vulnerabilities. She recognized the elegant architecture behind the intrusions, the same architectural philosophy she had studied during her internship years ago. When her phone vibrated with a response to her message, she wasn't surprised. Roosevelt Hotel Bar, 1 hour. At the hotel, Marcus sat in a quiet corner booth, nursing a sparkling water when Alexandra arrived. No introductions were necessary, just the heavy silence of two technological equals assessing each other across a new ethical divide. "You left signatures," Alexandra finally said, sliding into the booth. "Not obvious ones, but distinctive to someone who knows your work." "Perhaps subconsciously I wanted to be found," Marcus replied. "By the right person." Alexandra leaned forward. "Do you understand what you're risking? Everything you've built could vanish if this becomes public. Cybersecurity laws don't make exceptions for noble intentions." Marcus met her gaze steadily. "Do you understand what millions of people risk? Every day just existing in their own skin, the constant calculation of which humiliations to accept and which to fight." He recounted his experience at the airport in detail, the first time he'd spoken about it fully since it happened. Alexandra listened without interruption, her expression shifting from professional detachment to genuine concern. "I believe you," she said when he finished. "But there are legal channels." "That work for whom?" Marcus challenged. "The discrimination. Complaints against Atlantic Airways go back years. Their legal team buries them in paperwork and settlements with NDAs. Nothing changes." Alexandra glanced at her watch. I have a meeting with Caldwell in 45 minutes to present my findings. I've identified your methods, but not specifically you. Not yet. What will you tell him? That depends on what you tell me now, she replied. This campaign of yours, what's the end game? Destroy the airline? Personal revenge? Justice and change, Marcus answered without hesitation. I've collected irrefutable evidence of systematic discrimination. I want it acknowledged and addressed at a structural level, not dismissed as isolated incidents. I want protocols that protect everyone equally, with real consequences for violations. Alexandra considered this. The airline's losing millions every day this continues. Employees who had nothing to do with your experience are at risk of losing jobs. I've protected frontline staff in my code, Marcus countered. The economic pressure targets leadership and shareholders, the only language they seem to understand. Their conversation continued, tense but respectful, as Alexandra wrestled with her professional obligations and personal ethics. Marcus showed her evidence he'd gathered, the discriminatory patterns, the deliberately deleted security footage, the internal communications revealing bias. I need 48 hours, Alexandra finally said. Don't escalate further during that time. Why 48 hours? To verify your evidence independently and consider options. I built my career on digital ethics. I can't compromise that, even for causes I might sympathize with. Marcus agreed, knowing the risk he was taking by trusting her. When Alexandra met with Caldwell later that afternoon, she presented a carefully curated version of her findings. The intrusions are sophisticated but containable, she reported. I need another 2 days to complete my analysis before recommending specific countermeasures. Caldwell was visibly relieved. So you can stop this hacker? I can identify the vulnerabilities being exploited, she answered precisely, neither confirming nor denying his assumption. That evening, Alexandra began her own investigation into Atlantic Airways practices, using legitimate access granted for her cybersecurity work. What she found disturbed her professionally and personally. The evidence Marcus had shared checked out, and there was more. Employee evaluations showed racial disparities in advancement opportunities. Security protocols were applied inconsistently based on passenger demographics. Complaint resolution timeframes varied dramatically depending on customer profiles. As the daughter of Mexican immigrants who had faced discrimination throughout her life, Alexandra recognized the patterns. Still, her professional ethics demanded certainty before action. By the second day, she had verified enough to make her decision. She contacted Marcus securely. I need to show you something. Meet me at Dolores Park, noon. At the park, they sat on a bench overlooking the city. Alexandra handed Marcus a tablet displaying internal communications from Atlantic Airways' executive team. They've identified you, she said quietly. Not from my report. I've been careful. But their corporate security team connected the timing of your flight with the beginning of the incidents. They're preparing to contact the FBI Cybercrime Division tomorrow morning. Marcus absorbed this calmly. Sooner than I expected, but not surprising. You need to remove all traces of your program immediately, Alexandra urged. I can help create plausible alternative explanations for the technical issues. And let them continue discriminating? Marcus, they're building a case to destroy you personally and professionally. This isn't just about fines or lawsuits. They want to make an example of you. Marcus stared across the park, watching children play without the burdens adults carried. What would you do, Alexandra, if you had the power to force change where traditional methods had failed repeatedly? Alexandra was silent for a long moment. I'd do what aligned with my deepest values, not just my immediate anger, she finally answered. What are yours telling you? This question stayed with Marcus as they parted ways, each carrying half of a critical decision that would affect thousands of lives. The following morning dawned clear and cool as Marcus entered San Francisco International Airport. He had made his decision overnight, weighing Alexandra's warning against his original purpose. Now, with determination in every step, he moved through the crowded terminal toward the Atlantic Airways departure gates. Security cameras tracked his movement, Alert notifications pinged on multiple devices across the airline's security network. Marcus knew they would be watching. In fact, he was counting on it. At the same moment, in Atlantic Airways corporate headquarters, William Caldwell was briefing an FBI cybercrime specialist. "We've identified the perpetrator," he stated confidently. "Marcus Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Technologies, has been conducting a sophisticated cyber attack against our systems following a routine customer service incident." The agent frowned. "Reynolds Technologies? They're one of the most respected cybersecurity firms in the industry." "Which gave him both motive and opportunity," Caldwell pressed. "We have evidence linking the attacks to his personal grievance against our airline." Before the agent could respond, Caldwell's phone rang. "Sir," his security director's voice was tense. "Reynolds is at SFO right now, Terminal 3. Our staff has visual confirmation." "Detain him immediately," Caldwell ordered. "Contact airport police. We'll be right there." Within 15 minutes, Caldwell and the FBI agent arrived at the airport, where a tense situation was unfolding. Marcus stood calmly in the center of the terminal, while airline security personnel maintained a wary perimeter. Airport police officers had responded, but were hesitant to intervene without clear justification. "That's him," Caldwell declared, pointing at Marcus. "He's the one responsible for attacking our systems." The FBI agent approached cautiously. "Mr. Reynolds, I'd like to speak with you about some serious allegations." "I'd be happy to discuss them," Marcus replied calmly. "But first, I have a meeting with Mr. Caldwell, one that's long overdue." "There's nothing to discuss," Caldwell snapped. "You're facing federal charges." "Actually," Marcus countered, "we have a great deal to discuss, particularly with Dr. Washington present." As if on cue, Dr. Eliza Washington appeared from the nearby first-class lounge. "I received your message, Mr. Reynolds. I'm here as requested." Caldwell's face contorted with betrayal. "Eliza, you're working with him?" "I'm here to listen," she replied diplomatically. "Something you've consistently failed to do, William." The FBI agent, sensing the complexity of the situation, suggested they move to a private room. Minutes later, the four of them sat in an airport conference room, tension filling the air. Marcus placed his tablet on the table, its screen dark. "3 weeks ago, I was humiliated and discriminated against by your staff, Mr. Caldwell. When I researched further, I discovered this wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern affecting thousands of passengers." "So you attacked our systems?" Caldwell scoffed. "You've just confessed to a federal crime." "I haven't confessed to anything," Marcus replied evenly. "But I have gathered evidence. Comprehensive, irrefutable evidence of systematic discrimination throughout Atlantic Airways operations." Marcus turned to Dr. Washington. "Your own internal data shows that passengers of color are 43% more likely to be questioned about their tickets, 67% more likely to be downgraded from premium cabins, and experience average customer service response times twice as long as white passengers." Dr. Washington nodded grimly. "These align with concerns I've raised repeatedly in board meetings. Correlation isn't causation," Caldwell dismissed, "and none of this justifies criminal hacking." "What about specific directives to staff?" Marcus continued, undeterred. "October 12th email from your Chief of Customer Experience, and I quote, 'First-class cabins should maintain a certain aesthetic that reflects our premium brand image.'" The FBI agent frowned. "That's vague but not explicitly discriminatory." "Perhaps not in isolation," Marcus acknowledged. "But coupled with training materials instructing staff to watch for passengers who don't fit the Atlantic Airways image, and performance evaluations rewarding those who maintain cabin exclusivity, the meaning becomes clear." As Marcus presented more evidence, Dr. Washington's expression hardened. Caldwell's face paled. The FBI agent took careful notes. "What do you want?" Caldwell finally demanded. "Money? A public apology?" "Structural change," Marcus answered firmly. "New leadership committed to equitable treatment, transparent algorithms for pricing and upgrades, independent monitoring of customer interactions, consequences for discriminatory behavior, and yes, acknowledgement of past wrongs." That's corporate suicide, Caldwell protested. No, Dr. Washington interjected. It's corporate evolution, something long overdue. Caldwell leaned back, regaining his composure. This is an elaborate extortion attempt. You have no leverage, Reynolds. Without admitting anything, even if there were issues, exposing them through illegal means invalidates your evidence. Marcus smiled for the first time. Who said anything about illegal means? He turned to the FBI agent. Every piece of evidence I've presented was obtained through legal channels. Public records, requests, whistleblower accounts, analysis of publicly available booking data, my own experience as a passenger. I haven't penetrated a single Atlantic Airways system. But the technical issues, Caldwell sputtered, are likely due to the outdated infrastructure your cost-cutting created, Marcus suggested innocently. Perhaps if you'd invested properly, in secure systems rather than executive bonuses, these problems wouldn't occur. It was a perfectly crafted bluff. Marcus had indeed created the technical problems, but he'd left no provable connection to himself. Meanwhile, his evidence of discrimination stood on its own merits, legally obtained and damning. Caldwell realized the trap too late. If he continued accusing Marcus without proof, he risked a devastating defamation lawsuit from one of the country's most respected tech leaders. If he acknowledged the discrimination evidence, he faced corporate and possibly legal consequences. His face flushed with impotent rage. This meeting is over. We'll address these absurd allegations through proper channels. As Caldwell stood to leave, Marcus reached for his tablet. One moment, Mr. Caldwell. There's something you should see before you go. Marcus's finger hovered over an icon labeled Execute. This is connected to a program that could, hypothetically, shut down every Atlantic Airways system simultaneously. Booking, check-in, flight operations. All offline for hours, possibly days. The FBI agent tensed. Mr. Reynolds, that would be a criminal act. It would, Marcus agreed. If it existed. If I were to create such a program. If I were to activate it. The implied threat hung in the air. No one could prove such a program existed, yet no one was willing to call his bluff. Not with Atlantic Airways systems already experiencing unexplained issues. In that moment of suspended tension, with security approaching and his professional future balanced on a knife's edge, Marcus made his final move in a game only he fully understood. Record off, Dr. Washington suddenly announced, pressing a button on her phone that had been discreetly capturing the entire confrontation. Now we can speak freely. The unexpected declaration shifted the atmosphere in the room. Caldwell's eyes widened as he realized Eliza had been recording their conversation, including his dismissive response to evidence of discrimination. "You were recording this?" he hissed. "Without consent?" California is a two-party consent state for recordings. The FBI agent noted with professional detachment. "Which is why I just stopped recording," Dr. Washington replied smoothly. "But what I already have is quite illuminating, particularly when combined with other evidence I've been gathering independently for the past 6 months." She turned to Marcus. "Mr. Reynolds, your experience was unfortunate but perhaps fortuitous. It provided the final piece I needed to build a case for the board." For the first time, Marcus found himself surprised by these developments. "You've been investigating Atlantic Airways practices?" "Since I joined the board 2 years ago," she confirmed. "As the only black executive, I noticed patterns others ignored. Unlike you, I didn't have the technical skills to analyze our systems, but I had access and patience." She produced a tablet of her own, displaying a secure messaging app. "And right now, the board is voting on a resolution I proposed yesterday. A complete leadership reorganization in response to evidence of systematic discrimination that creates unacceptable legal and financial exposure for shareholders." Caldwell lunged for her tablet, but the FBI agent intervened. "Sir, I'd advise against any actions that could be construed as assault or obstruction." Before Caldwell could respond, Dr. Washington's tablet chimed with an incoming message. She read it silently, her expression revealing nothing. Then she looked up, meeting Caldwell's gaze directly. The resolution passed, William. Effective immediately, you are removed as CEO of Atlantic Airways. The board has appointed me as interim CEO while a search committee identifies a permanent replacement. Caldwell's face drained of color. This is a coup, a conspiracy between you and Reynolds. I've never met Mr. Reynolds before today, Dr. Washington replied calmly. Though I'm grateful his experience brought these issues to a head. Sometimes, it takes a catalyst to precipitate necessary change. The FBI agent, assessing the rapidly evolving situation, addressed Marcus. Regarding the alleged cyber attacks, there's another possibility worth considering, Dr. Washington interrupted. Our internal assessment suggests the recent technical issues stem from incompatible updates to our legacy systems. Updates Mr. Caldwell approved, despite IT department warnings about potential instabilities. She turned to Caldwell. Documentation I've provided to the board confirms you deliberately bypassed security protocols to cut costs, creating precisely the vulnerabilities we're experiencing now. Marcus watched this masterful redirection with genuine admiration. Dr. Washington had created a perfect alternative explanation for the system issues, one that placed responsibility squarely on Caldwell's cost-cutting measures rather than external interference. The FBI agent, lacking technical expertise to evaluate these competing explanations, made a practical decision. We'll need statements from all parties and access to system logs to determine if criminal investigation is warranted. Atlantic Airways will cooperate fully, Dr. Washington assured him. Transparency will be a cornerstone of our new leadership approach. As the meeting concluded, Marcus and Dr. Washington exchanged business cards, their first official contact, establishing a paper trail that supported their claim of having no prior relationship. I look forward to discussing how Reynolds Technologies might help upgrade Atlantic Airways' security infrastructure, Marcus said professionally. As do I, Dr. Washington replied with equal formality. We clearly have vulnerabilities that need addressing. Outside the conference room, Caldwell was escorted from the premises by airline security, the same security that had humiliated Marcus weeks earlier. The symmetry wasn't lost on either of them. In the following days, Atlantic Airways announced a leadership transition amid a comprehensive review of customer service practices. Dr. Washington gave interviews, outlining a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination and announcing the creation of an independent oversight committee to monitor passenger treatment. The class action lawsuit that had been building gained a powerful ally when Atlantic Airways, under its new leadership, chose to settle rather than fight. The settlement included not only substantial monetary damages, but also committed the airline to industry-leading anti-bias training, transparent ticket pricing algorithms, and regular civil rights audits. Behind the scenes, Marcus discreetly removed all traces of his program from the airline's systems. The technical issues mysteriously resolved themselves once Caldwell departed, a coincidence that reinforced the narrative of management negligence rather than external attacks. 6 months later, Marcus boarded an Atlantic Airways flight to London for a technology conference. As he settled into his first-class seat, a flight attendant approached, not Veronica Patterson, who had been terminated along with Hammond and several others implicated in discriminatory practices, but a young black woman with a warm professional smile. Mr. Reynolds, welcome aboard. It's an honor to have you flying with us. If there's anything you need during your flight, please don't hesitate to ask. As the plane taxied for takeoff, Marcus glanced at his tablet, where an email from Dr. Washington awaited. The subject line read simply, Transformation Update. The message detailed Atlantic Airways' progress. Bias complaints down 82%, employee satisfaction up 41%, and despite initial investor concerns, stock prices recovering, as the airline's renewed commitment to ethical practices attracted a broader customer base. After landing in London, Marcus made a detour before his conference. In a community center in Brixton, 15 young black and brown teenagers waited excitedly for their special guest, the famous tech CEO who had volunteered to teach a coding workshop. For 3 hours, Marcus guided them through basic cybersecurity principles, answering questions and encouraging their curiosity. As the session concluded, a girl of about 14 raised her hand. "Mr. Reynolds, my teacher said you build systems to protect people. Is that true?" Marcus considered her question carefully, thinking about all that had transpired since that fateful flight. "Yes," he finally answered. "Technology is powerful, but its greatest purpose is making the world more fair, more accessible, and more just for everyone. The most secure system isn't the one with the strongest barriers, it's the one where everyone is treated with equal respect." As he looked at these bright young faces, the next generation of technologists, business leaders, and changemakers, Marcus knew his greatest legacy wouldn't be the code he wrote or the company he built, but the doors he helped open for those who would follow. The story of Marcus Reynolds teaches us that true power often lies not in seeking revenge, but in creating accountability where traditional systems fail. Marcus could have used his technological brilliance for destruction, but chose instead to illuminate patterns of injustice that affected countless others. This reminds us that privilege, whether in skills, resources, or position, carries responsibility to lift others. Dr. Washington demonstrated that change sometimes requires working within systems while simultaneously challenging their failures. By patiently gathering evidence and building alliances, she positioned herself to implement structural reforms when the moment arrived. Perhaps most importantly, this story reveals how discrimination persists not through isolated incidents but through patterns that become visible only when we connect individual experiences. The most effective response isn't just addressing single occurrences but transforming the systems that enable them. Ultimately, Marcus discovered that justice is most meaningful when it creates pathways for others. His technical skills opened the door, but the lasting change came through empowering others to walk through it, creating spaces where excellence can flourish regardless of what someone looks like or where they come from. What discrimination have you witnessed or experienced in your life? Drop a comment below sharing your story or thoughts on how technology might be used to combat discrimination. If you found value in this story about confronting racism and creating change, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that challenge unjust systems. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how discrimination operates and how it can be overcome. Thank you for joining us on this journey toward a more equitable world where everyone's dignity is respected regardless of their appearance.